You'll pay for this. I'll take what's most precious to you. You'll be ready to give up everything for it, and I'll still take everything and never give him back to you," my daughter hissed, her breath hot with gin and something sweeter and cheaper. I kept my hand steady on the doorknob. The porch light behind me made a halo of dust. "Not tonight, Lila," I said. "No more money." I used to write the loans down on the back pages of a church bulletin: $20 for gas, $100 for textbooks she never opened, $400 for a deposit on an apartment that never had a lease. After $28,000, the number stopped meaning anything. I tore the bulletin in half and told myself that love could be firm without being cruel. That night love was a deadbolt sliding into place while my daughter cursed me from the steps. 5 months without Scott, and the house still remembered him. The leather of his chair kept the map of his shoulders. The coffee cup on the shelf, smoked glaze, chipped rim, caught the last of the afternoon sun like a wink. But the gravest testimony stood on the middle bookcase, a small black urn between my cracked-spine Bible and a row of mystery novels he said I read too fast. Every night when I came in from my walk or book club, I set my keys down, washed my hands, and went to him first. My fingers traced the urn's cool curve. "Hi, love," I whispered. "I'm home." Then I could cook, eat, sleep. Order from the day restored. We had promised the ocean. 30 years ago on our honeymoon, we'd stood barefoot at Half Moon Bay and sworn we'd come back for our 50th, even if it meant he had to carry me or I had to drag him. We didn't make 50. Cancer is a thief with excellent time management. When he asked me to scatter his ashes there, I said yes because I believed I would be brave by then. Grief taught me otherwise. The bravest thing I did most days was get out of bed. The children, the word tastes wrong for people in their 30s, didn't come around after the funeral except to fight. They fought at the graveside, they fought in the car, they fought in my kitchen where the casseroles steamed like small chimneys on the counter. Lila wanted to access liquidity, her phrase, and Carter wanted a truck worthy of Dad's memory. What Scott left me was not a fortune, but it was enough: a paid-off house, 2 modest IRAs, and the life insurance that settled into my account like a wary bird. I told them I would pay their loan minimums for 1 year if they showed me proof of steady work and sobriety. They laughed. They didn't bring proof. They brought friends. Locks mean nothing to people who have memorized the rattle of your windows. Food began to vanish, first the cuts of meat I marinated, then the stubborn things, frozen peas, the good butter, yogurt cups with my initials penned on top like amulets. One afternoon my jewelry box was simply gone, a clean rectangle of dust on the dresser. The officer who came was younger than the rings I had lost. He suggested pawn shops. He didn't write much down. I found my wedding set under smeared glass in a strip mall pawn across from a tire place. The owner told me a tall, twitchy young man sold them for $4,700 and a story about a divorce. Said he had permission, the owner added with a shrug that meant he didn't care if permission were written on the moon. I bought them back anyway. Then I rented a safety deposit box at the bank with the potted ficus and the Voltaire that smelled like nickels and old winter. My rings looked strange under fluorescent light, as if love required sunlight to be true. That evening Lila came again, drunk enough to cry mean. She said I ruined her life when she was 16 and forced her to get an abortion. The lie hit me like a slap before the real one arrived. She pushed me, my reading glasses shattered. A sliver bit into my palm and the blood felt obscene on the linoleum, too bright for a kitchen Scott had painted a calm blue. "Call the cops," she shouted, backing away. "You want your junkie kids in prison? You never believed in us." She ran, and the door swung open like a mouth left mid-sentence. She returned the next morning with a headache and a handout. When I refused, her face hardened into the stranger she's been practicing to become. I eased her outside. Her boyfriend, 6'5" and sour with cheap whiskey, leaned on my fence like a bouncer. "You'll pay for this," he said. "We'll take what's dearest to you." They laughed and left tire dust on my curb. I cleaned the glass. I bandaged my hand. I made soup because people in grief always make soup. I told myself, not for the first time, that I would be brave tomorrow. I went to book club that night and pretended to argue about endings, whether a story has to keep its promises. On the way home I bought flowers, pale tulips Scott would have called funeral white, and I hated myself and bought them anyway. The house was quiet when I came in. I rinsed the tulips in the sink, shook them dry, and carried them to the bookcase where I always set them, near the black urn. The space was empty. For a long, stupid heartbeat my eyes tried to invent the urn, like it had slid behind the Bible or tucked itself into the row of mysteries. The tulips slipped in my hand and I heard their wet heads hit the floor. I set the stems down carefully, as if the balance of the world depended on my gentleness, and I looked again. There was the square of dust where the urn had sat, the cleaner ring where I'd wiped it every night. There was the cruel, obvious absence. The sound I made was not human. It scraped up from a place that had no words, only raw weather. I searched the house the way you search dreams, opening closets, calling a name that can't answer. The front window latch was nicked where a credit card could slide. On the porch a muddy print bloomed on the mat, a tread I didn't know and yet knew. I dialed 911 with hands that didn't feel like mine. The officer stood in my living room and tried to look solemn. One of them asked, gently, whether I might have relocated the remains for safekeeping. I showed them the dust square, the wiped ring, the brittle tulips on the floor. They took notes then, a few more than before. "We'll file a report," the older one said. The word report sounded like a lid closing. After they left, the house breathed differently, like a lung with a missing lobe. I made it to Scott's chair and sat there with my bandaged hand over my mouth. Outside, a car idled and moved on. Somewhere a dog barked twice and thought better of a third. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, "Check your email." Another bubble appeared before I could answer, "He'll come home when you pay what he left you. 2 million. Don't play stupid." I didn't know whether to laugh or be sick. They believed the rumors, the way vultures believe heat is life. I opened my laptop with fingers that had learned to shake this week. In my inbox sat a single message with a subject line that slashed, "Pay or say goodbye again." There was a photo attached. They had placed the urn on the hood of a car and framed it with beer cans like candles on a cheap altar. Lila's nail polish, chipped coral, held the lid. Carter's tattooed knuckles flashed in the chrome. In the reflection I could see myself, too, a bent woman in a window, the world's smallest witness. I should have called the officer back. I should have forwarded the email. Instead, I did the only thing that felt like breathing. I stood, wiped my eyes with the heel of my hand, and said aloud to the empty house, "Okay, Scott. If they want to play games, we'll bring a referee." On the fridge, tucked under a grandchild's crayon sun from a life that never arrived, was a card from the library, our book club's new members welcome night. In the corner, written in neat, almost fussy script, was a name I didn't recognize yet, Jeremy Hale. Underneath it, smaller, systems engineer. Tomorrow, I told myself. Be brave tomorrow. The next morning the neighborhood looked normal in that offensive way grief notices, sprinklers clicking, a jogger with a neon headband, the mailman waving like life were a sitcom rerun. I made coffee so strong it could file taxes and carried it to the porch steps. In my inbox, their photo still glared. A second email had arrived overnight, 2 million by Friday. Wire only. Proof required. No cops. The account number was a tangle of digits that meant nothing and everything. At 10 sharp I went to the library. I told myself I was going for the large print shelves and to return a mystery novel with an ending too convenient, but my feet knew better. The community room held our circle of chairs, a table of grocery store cookies, and a pot of coffee that had never once been as good as mine. There were the regulars, Evelyn with her penciled eyebrows, Roberto who annotated with colored tabs, Alice who always brought a blanket. And there he was, a man about 40 with tidy hair and a face that could pass for a substitute teacher's until he looked up and the room got sharper. "Jeremy," said our moderator. "You've met Maggie?" I hadn't. He stood and offered a hand. The handshake said engineer, warm enough, but already calculating load-bearing. I liked your point last week, he said, about endings needing to be earned. His voice was careful, like he checked words for splinters before offering them. I hadn't planned to say anything. I'd promised myself I'd wear restraint like a scarf and keep my grief from choking anyone else. But when the group broke for cookies, an older woman asked how I was holding up and the scarf unraveled. They stole my husband, I heard myself say. What's left of him? I told them about the empty square of dust, the email, the demand that equaled the number I was pretending didn't sit in my bank like a trapped animal. The room went quiet the way rooms do when everyone is trying to inventory the right kind of sympathy. You need to call the police, someone said. I did, I answered. They filed a report. The word hung like a paper umbrella over a hurricane. After, when the chair scraped and the cookie tray was dented with thumbprints, Jeremy lingered. Ms. Callahan, he said. I hadn't told him my last name, but it was on the sign-up sheet. Can I ask, did they send the message from a Gmail? Did it have any headers visible? I blinked. He pulled his phone from his pocket, then seemed to think better of it and set it down on the table like a man leaving a weapon outside a nursery. I work in systems, he said. Freelance mostly. Some contracts with, let's call it federal clients. Nothing spooky. Mostly boring. But I'm good with patterns. If you're willing, I can take a look. No promises, and I'm not offering anything illegal. Just another pair of eyes. I thought of the officer's polite boredom and of Scott's chair, which had never looked so empty. All right, I said. But if you get me arrested for hacking, you're bringing me lemon squares in jail. He smiled a real smile, the kind that warms without asking for thanks. Deal. At my kitchen table, with its faint ring from a Thanksgiving gravy boat, I opened the email for him. He asked permission before clicking anything, a small courtesy that felt like a handrail. We'll start by viewing the full headers, he murmured, half to himself. He scanned the string of numbers and letters the way Scott used to scan baseball stats. Hopped through a public relay, of course. But look here, there's a mobile upload indicator on the photo. And the EXIF data, scrubbed, mostly. Not completely. He leaned in so close the screen glowed on his glasses. There's a reflection in the chrome, he said. Your window, yes. But also this, see the corner of a sticker on the hood? That's not random. That's a team logo. He enlarged until the pixels looked like a mosaic. Central Valley Mustangs. Semi-pro. Your daughter's boyfriend plays? He's tall and useless, I said. Does that count as playing? Jeremy's mouth twitched. Maybe more than you know. He tapped a note into his phone. Between that and the beer brand, only one gas station in town stocks that cheap Southern label. They didn't drive far. And this, he pointed at the mud tread on my porch photo I'd texted him. Pattern matches a popular basketball shoe, new release, limited colorway. Hard to get unless you resell gear or hang around certain places. You're doing this from my kitchen table, I said, half amazed, half terrified. What do the federal clients pay you to do when you're not moonlighting as Sherlock? Find needles in haystacks, he said. And remind people not to set their haystacks on fire. He looked up. Maggie, may I call you Maggie? You cannot pay them. Even if you could bear it, they will not stop. Extortion is a hydra. You cut one head, another grows. The only safe path is to string them along while we build a box they can't see. String them along how? He sat back, thread counting options. You ask for proof of life. Not of a person, we're not monsters, but of the urn. Something they can only do if they have it intact. Today's newspaper beside it, or the lid unscrewed, or a mark you privately choose. Meanwhile, I'll set up a controlled line, a number that records with legal consent because you'll announce it. A single-purpose email account on a clean machine. And, if you're comfortable, a view-only bank portal that looks like yours but isn't. Something that can display a pending wire, with the exact amount they want. We won't touch real funds. We'll display what they need to believe. Is that legal? Deception of a criminal to prevent a crime is messy but not illegal on its face, he said carefully. Entrapment is for law enforcement, I'm a civilian. The line we won't cross is moving money. We'll coordinate with actual agents before any real exchange. I can make introductions quietly. The Bureau takes extortion seriously, especially when interstate wires are threatened. He paused. But this is your call. It's your husband. Your kids. My kids. The phrase felt like a fever. My phone buzzed like it heard its cue, a blocked number. I put it on speaker and set it on the table. You're on a recorded line, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Who is this? Stop playing games, Mom. Lila. The consonants slurred at the edges, but the venom was sober. 2 million by Friday or we scatter him in a parking lot, see how he likes that ocean. Proof, I said. Today's paper next to the urn. And I want the lid off. I want to see the blue ribbon I tied around the bag. You do that, and I'll send you a screenshot of the wire in progress. You'll get your money. But I need to know you haven't done anything. Silence. A male voice in the background said, she's bluffing, and another voice, Carter's, said, she can't bluff, she's a church lady. Then Lila, check your phone in an hour. The line clicked dead. I sagged against the chair. Jeremy had his polite smile on again, the one that was more shield than greeting. Good, he said. That bought us 60 minutes. He opened his laptop and spun it toward me. I'm going to put together a portal with your bank's fonts and colors but none of its teeth. When the time comes, we'll show a pending wire with a tracer number that looks official but goes nowhere. They'll have a countdown clock, criminals love clocks, they make them feel in control. The moment they tell us where and when, I call a friend. He hesitated. Former colleague. He'll route you to the right folks without you getting lost in a phone tree. An hour later my phone pinged with a message that turned my stomach to ice. The urn, yes, balanced on a cheap folding table. Beside it, that day's paper. The lid unscrewed, the blue ribbon I'd tied around the inner bag peaked like a vein. Someone, Carter, by the knuckle tattoos, held a post-it that read, pay by Friday. Another photo, the urn with a fresh scratch on its side, ugly and deliberate. The caption, next time we don't stop at the paint. I swallowed the sound that wanted to come out. Jeremy zoomed, scanned, and nodded to himself. Storage unit, he said. See the roll-up door shadows? The cinderblock paint? Also, this sticker on the table leg, from a moving company on South Arlen. There are 3 storage facilities within 2 miles of that shop. 2 use wood tables. 1 uses metal. He typed, paused, typed again. And your son posted on social media last week bragging about a new HQ near the gym. He turned the screen so I could see Carter's profile, public and proud. A photo of the same folding table, loaded with cheap beer, in front of a gray metal door numbered 114. Can we just go? I asked. Just walk in and take him back? He shook his head. They'll have cameras, and you don't know who else is there. Mag, I know this gnaws like a live wire, but we're going to do this once and right. You'll message back, the wire is initiated, bank requires confirmation of receipt within 24 hours, which triggers release. Where can my courier verify the item? That tells them 2 things, you have money and a plan. It also asks for a location, which we need. I typed exactly what he said, hands steady because I used his steadiness like scaffolding. The reply came fast, cashier's check, not a wire. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. We'll send a pin. 1 person. No cops. Bring your phone. If we smell bacon, the ocean gets a new friend. Cashier's check means they want to see paper, Jeremy said. Good. Paper is easier to control than electrons. We'll loop in the bureau, get a controlled check with a tracker. And we'll get eyes on Unit 114 before then. He glanced at my bleeding palm, bandage gone gray at the edge. But tonight you sleep. You'll need all your clarity. I don't sleep, I said. Not since the hospice nurse carried him out. The house hums like a refrigerator and I count the seconds between its kicks. He nodded, as if that were a normal thing people confessed at kitchen tables. Then rest. I'll start the calls. He stood, then paused in the doorway. Maggie, one more thing. When they text, let them. Don't block. Every word is a brick in the case we're building. That night the calls came like weather. Midnight. 1:07, 1:59. Lila, half sobbing, half spitting, you owe us, you owe us. Carter, calmer, it's just money, Mom. Dad would want, and I wasn't sure whether I shouted or whispered when I said, don't you dare use your father's name to bless your theft. The boyfriend chimed in once, a bass note threatening to break the speakers. 3 p.m., lady. Wear something black. Between calls I sat in Scott's chair and watched the square of dust on the bookcase like it might fill itself in if I stared hard enough. At 3:12 a.m. I texted Jeremy, still in? The reply came instantly, as if he'd been waiting for my insomnia to find him, always. Check your email. There it was, a mock portal with my bank's colors, my name spelled right, the amount entered, $2,000,000. 00, status, pending clearance. A button labeled release upon confirmation did nothing when I clicked it, which was exactly what it should do. Underneath, a string of numbers that looked like a wire tracer and weren't. Tomorrow we'll show them this on your phone, his message read. They won't have time to question. At 6:40 I brewed another pot and watched dawn crease the sky. It felt obscene that the world could be new when I was a rerun. The doorbell rang at 7:05. It was a uniform, not the officer from before but his partner, older, eyes that knew too much about late nights. Ms. Callahan, he said. A Mr. Hale asked me to stop by. Said you might be the kind of person who would try to handle this alone if left unsupervised. He smiled to take the sting from the truth. We're coordinating. Discreetly. I'll be nearby at 3. You won't see me. But I'll see you. I almost cried from the relief of being seen. Thank you, I said, and wrote down his first name on a post-it, Owen, because I'm old-fashioned and still believe names matter in emergencies. At noon Lila sent one more twist of the knife, a video. Carter unscrewed the urn lid with dramatized care, like a villain in a silent film. He didn't open the inner bag, even he wasn't that careless, or maybe he was simply superstitious. The camera panned to a door with a number. Not 114. 210, Jeremy texted, they moved it. Good. More cameras on the second floor. Then, change of plan. They're making mistakes now, fear makes people sloppy. We'll ask for a new proof that only 210 can provide. Tell them to scratch a small X under the urn's base, then send a photo of the X and the room's fire extinguisher tag. I sent the request. 2 minutes later, a blurry X, clumsy and too deep, and a extinguisher tag stamped inspected, July 24th with a company name I recognized from my days as the PTA mom who organized everything. Jeremy's reply arrived with a second message attached from someone with a Gov address, we're set. Meet at 2:30 behind the bakery on 3rd. Don't bring the check. Bring your phone and the mock portal. We'll do the rest. At 2:15 my hands shook so badly I redid my lipstick 3 times. I put on a black blouse not because the boyfriend told me to but because it made me feel like a widow and a witness and a woman who could still choose her own costume. I tucked the phone in my purse and Scott's old handkerchief in my sleeve because grief always needs a clean corner. At 2:29 I parked behind the bakery that smelled like forgiveness. Jeremy stood there in a jacket that made him look less like a substitute teacher and more like a man who could ask a computer to confess. Officer Owen materialized from a shadow and nodded at me like we were neighbors meeting at the mailbox. You'll walk in with your phone, he said softly. You'll show them the pending screen. You'll say you need to tap release when you see the urn. That's your line. Don't improvise. If they insist on paper, you'll tell them the bank will only print upon confirmation. Keep your voice calm. They want to feel like the adults. Let them. And if they hurt him? I asked, hating the pronoun that turned ashes into a person but loving it anyway. They won't, he said. Criminals rarely destroy the leverage they think pays them. And you asked for proof of life that proved they're careful with the contents. You did well. My phone buzzed. An address. A PIN. Unit 210. 3 p.m. Come alone. Prove you're not a liar. We go now, Jeremy said. And remember, Maggie, they think they're directing the play. We're just giving them better lines. We turned the corner of the storage complex at 2:58. The sun struck the rows of metal doors so bright they looked like a set for a show about regret. My heart did its drum solo. As I crossed the painted number 210, my phone lit again with a final message that made my mouth go dry. Bring an overnight bag and don't call the police. Or say goodbye again. The air inside the storage complex was hotter than outside, thick with the smell of motor oil and trapped dust. The fluorescent lights hummed like nervous bees. My shoes made sharp echoes on the concrete. I clutched my phone so tightly my fingers ached. The fake portal screen glowed, $2 million. 00, pending clearance. I prayed the illusion would be enough. Unit 210 loomed at the end of the corridor. The roll-up door was half open, leaving a shadowed rectangle like a gaping mouth. A folding chair sat in front, occupied by my daughter. Lila, in ripped jeans and a shirt that once belonged to me, now stained with something darker than wine. She held a cigarette without bothering to smoke it, just letting the ash grow longer until it broke. Her eyes were sharp, spiteful, but beneath the anger, I saw the tremor of someone stretched too thin. You came, she said. Good little mom. Where's the check? I need to see him first, I answered. My voice surprised me, it didn't shake, though my knees threatened to. That was the deal. Carter stepped forward then, taller than I remembered, broad-shouldered from gym hours but hollow-eyed from nights that chewed him raw. He carried the urn like a football, tucked under one arm. My chest tightened at the sight, Scott's ashes, my promise, held like a prop in some cruel play. Show her, Carter said. He unscrewed the lid with deliberate slowness. For a moment, I thought he'd be reckless enough to tip the bag inside. Instead, he lifted the ribboned pouch an inch and let it drop again with a thud. Satisfied? I nodded, forcing calm. Once I tap this, I said, holding up the phone, the wire clears. You'll have access within 24 hours. That's how banks work. No exceptions. Lila sneered. We don't want 24 hours. We want now. Cash. A check. Something we can touch. Then you'll get nothing, I said. I don't carry $2 million in my purse like loose change. This is the only way. I tapped the phone screen lightly, showing them the fake release button. When I press, it goes. But I won't press until he's in my hands. Behind me, the corridor hummed with silence, though I knew Jeremy and Officer Owen weren't far. The plan hinged on patience, mine, theirs, and the bureau's, who had men watching every entrance. For a second, I thought it would crumble. Lila's face twisted, and she hurled her cigarette to the ground. You're lying. You've lied my whole life. You ruined me, ruined everything. She grabbed the urn from Carter's arm. My heart stopped. Careful, Carter snapped, but she only held it higher, the lid loose. Press the button, Mom. Or I scatter him right here. The choice was razor-edged. My finger hovered over the screen. I whispered, Scott, help me. Then I pressed. The fake portal refreshed, flashing green, transfer complete, funds in processing. The numbers rolled like slot machines before freezing on $2,000,000 cleared. I tilted the phone so they could see. Lila's mouth opened in shock. Carter stared hard, weighing truth against suspicion. Finally, greed won. He lowered the urn, clutching it to his chest. "We'll check," he muttered. "We'll see it hit." They backed toward the unit's shadows. My pulse roared. Jeremy had told me, "That's your cue. When they turn their backs, we move." And just as Carter reached the threshold of Unit 210, voices shattered the air. "FBI! Drop it now!" Flashlights and boots stormed from both sides of the corridor. Lila screamed. Carter froze, then bolted, the urn still in his grip. The world spun into chaos, shouts, hands grabbing, the urn slipping. I lunged, instinct stronger than fear. My fingers closed around cold ceramic as Carter let go. I cradled it against me like the newborn my children once were and never became. Agents swarmed, pinning Lila to the ground. She thrashed, cursing me with words I never thought I'd hear from the mouth I once kissed goodnight. Carter, quicker, slid through a side door, gone before they could close in. His footsteps pounded away into the hot, empty afternoon. I stood in the middle of it all, holding Scott, shaking, breathless. For the first time in months, I whispered not just "I'm home" but "I've got you back." And I knew this wasn't the end. Carter was still out there. And the storm of what came next had only just begun. The unit still smelled of dust and gasoline when the echoes of Carter's footsteps faded. Agents and windbreakers moved like a tide around me, radio chatter, the scrape of cuffs on concrete, the hiss of someone reading rights. Lila's voice rose above it all, ragged and furious. "She set us up. You hear me? My mother set us up." Her words cracked in the air, a bitter hymn. For a moment, I almost forgot the urn in my arms until an agent, a woman with cropped hair and kind eyes, touched my elbow. "Ma'am, let's step outside. You're shaking." I was shaking. The urn rattled faintly against my ribs, as though Scott himself were shivering with me. I let them guide me into the late afternoon sun. The light burned too bright after the dim corridor. My vision tunneled, then cleared. Jeremy appeared at my side, calm as if we'd just left book club. "You did it," he said softly. "You held the line." I nearly lost him again. My voice was a thread. "If she'd dropped." "She didn't," he interrupted gently. "And you didn't." He gestured toward the squad car where Lila sat, her head pressed against the glass, mascara streaking her cheeks. She looked 16 again for one blinding instant, the night she'd confessed her pregnancy, her fear, the night I promised we'd figure it out. My heart split between rage and pity. "She's still my daughter," I whispered. "She's also guilty of extortion," Jeremy said. "And that means she faces consequences. Sometimes love looks like not pulling someone out of the fire they lit themselves." Officer Owen joined us then, his face grave but steady. "We'll process her. The U.S. Attorney will want statements. You'll be protected, Mrs. Callahan. She can't contact you from jail." "Carter?" I asked. "Gone," Owen admitted. "But he won't get far. We've got his photo, his prints, his car plates. Running won't save him." He hesitated. "And men who think $1 million is waiting usually make mistakes fast." That night, the house felt less like a tomb and more like a battlefield after smoke cleared. I placed the urn back on the shelf between the Bible and the novels, brushing my fingers over the scratch Carter had left. "You've come home," I whispered. "Even scarred, you've come home." Sleep didn't come easy. Around midnight, the phone rang. Unknown number. I froze, then answered. A voice I knew too well, rough and defiant. "You think you've won, Mom? You think you're safe? I'm in Mexico. Sun on my face, money in my account. You can rot with your ashes." The line went dead before I could reply. My knees gave out and I sank into Scott's chair. "Mexico." He thought he had the 2 million. He thought the illusion was real. Jeremy's words returned to me, extortion is a hydra. You cut one head, another grows. But this time, maybe the head had swallowed poison without knowing it. I stared at the urn until dawn. Carter had escaped, yes. But he was running with empty hands, chasing a phantom fortune. And fate has a way of punishing greed more brutally than any courtroom. For the first time since Scott died, I prayed, not for strength, but for patience. Because I knew Carter's fall was coming. And when it did, I wanted to be ready. The morning after Carter's call, the air in my house felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves had listened. I brewed coffee but barely tasted it. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted, expecting another taunt. Instead, what arrived were official emails, case numbers, contact names, instructions for upcoming hearings. Lila would face charges of extortion, conspiracy, assault. She was behind bars, but Carter had become a shadow stretching across the border. Jeremy stopped by with croissants that smelled faintly of butter and cinnamon. Eat, he said, placing them on my counter. Your strength isn't optional right now. He sat opposite me, his laptop open, screens glowing with maps and feeds. Your son's making noise already. He showed me Carter's social media, photos from beachside bars in Baja, grainy selfies with tequila bottles, captions dripping with arrogance. Living like a king. Cash rules. Mexico forever. He actually believes it, I whispered. He thinks the money is real. Jeremy nodded. Greed blinds sharper than love. He's flashing imaginary wealth, and sooner or later, the wrong people will notice. Down there, boasting is a death wish. By evening, he was right. A video surfaced, Carter in a nightclub, throwing bills that looked crisp under neon. A local gang account reposted it with laughing emojis. The caption, "The gringo thinks he's rich." My heart sank. Danger wasn't a maybe anymore, it was a certainty. 2 days later, Owen stopped by with an update. He stood on my porch like a man delivering both justice and pity. Word is, your son's made enemies. He rented a villa on the edge of Tijuana, paid the deposit with counterfeit bills he didn't know were counterfeit. The landlord called in men who don't use lawyers. He hesitated. If the cartel thinks he's sitting on millions, they'll squeeze him until he cracks. When they find out it's smoke, well, smoke doesn't buy forgiveness. I clutched the doorframe. So he'll die. Owen's jaw tightened. Or worse. That night, the phone rang again. Carter's voice was jagged, frantic. Mom. They've got me. They want the account, the password. You have to send it, you have to make the transfer real. I heard shouting behind him, a slap, his muffled cry. Please, Mom. Don't let them, the line cut off. I sat frozen, the silence after his plea louder than the storm. Every instinct screamed to protect him, to reach through the line and pull him back. But then my gaze slid to the urn on the shelf, to the scratch that would never vanish. Scott's ashes. My promise. My survival. Jeremy came the next morning, his eyes dark from sleeplessness. The bureau traced the call. Mexico City now, not Tijuana. He's being moved like cargo. Maggie, this is out of your hands. Interpol might step in, but your son lit the fire himself. We can't put it out without burning with him. I wanted to argue. I wanted to beg someone to save him. But another part of me, the part grief had sharpened into steel, whispered that maybe this was the only punishment fitting for a son who stole his father's ashes for ransom. Still, the mother in me didn't die, not even after everything. I wrote his name in my Bible's margin that night, a prayer and a curse in the same ink. And as I laid my hand on Scott's urn, I whispered, if fate must take him, let it be quick. Let it not be cruel. But deep down, I knew fate rarely listened to bargains. Days blurred like smudged ink. Every sunrise felt stolen, every phone ring a blade. News of Carter trickled through whispers Jeremy intercepted from contacts in law enforcement. "They're holding him," he told me one morning, his voice low, careful, but not in a cell. "In a house. A cartel safe house. They still think he has millions. They're giving him rope, enough to hang himself when they find it's all air." I pressed my palms together so hard my knuckles whitened. "And when they see the account is fake?" Jeremy's eyes softened with something between pity and admiration. "They'll make him an example. And Maggie, there's nothing you can do. The Bureau won't trade with them. No one will." I wanted to scream that he was still my son, even if he was broken. Instead, I nodded, because the steel in me knew he was no longer mine to save. Meanwhile, Lila sat in county jail, awaiting her arraignment. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, and the prosecutors called me daily, reminding me I was the primary victim. Victim. A word that fit and didn't. Victim sounded passive, like a leaf in a storm. But I'd fought. I'd clawed my husband's ashes back from their hands. Victim didn't taste right in my mouth. At the courthouse, Lila looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, her wrists swallowed by the cuffs. When they brought her in, she found me instantly, her glare sharp enough to pierce. "Traitor," she mouthed, lips curling. For a split second I saw the baby she'd been, swaddled in pink, eyes wide and trusting. Then it was gone. The judge listed charges: extortion, conspiracy, assault, destruction of property. Lila rolled her eyes, smirked, whispered to her public defender. When my name was called as witness, my legs wobbled, but I stood. I told the truth. About the broken glasses. About the threats. About the urn. My voice didn't break until I said, "She took what was most precious to me, the last piece of my husband. And she tried to sell it back to me like I was a stranger." Silence followed, heavy and complete. Even the judge's gavel seemed softer when it struck. That night, Jeremy came by again. He carried a folder, not pastries. His face was pale. "There's news," he said. "Carter's not in Mexico anymore." My breath caught. "Then where?" "Arizona." Border Patrol picked up chatter. "He slipped across last night, running from the very men he tried to cheat. He thinks he can disappear here, maybe cash in somehow." "But Maggie," he hesitated, then slid a photo across the table. It was grainy, security cam footage, Carter stumbling out of a bus station, eyes darting, shirt torn. He looked less like a son and more like a hunted animal. "What happens to him?" I whispered. Jeremy didn't answer right away. "Finally, that's for karma to decide. And karma has a long memory." That night, I sat in Scott's chair, urn safe in my lap, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. 2 children, one behind bars, the other running from men more merciless than the law. And me, holding the ashes of the only person who'd ever truly been mine. "Scott," I murmured, "you asked me to scatter you by the ocean. Maybe one day I will. But not yet. Not until this storm passes. Not until I know it's finished." And for the first time since the urn had vanished, I felt a strange flicker inside me, not relief, not victory, but something colder, steadier. Resolve. Because I realized, the story wasn't over. Not for Lila. Not for Carter. And not for me. Carter's shadow followed me even when I tried not to think of him. His calls had stopped, but the silence didn't bring peace. It was the silence of someone running, of someone desperate enough to burn every bridge just to feel the heat. Jeremy kept me updated, though I never asked. "He's moving through Arizona," he said one evening, sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open. "Sleeping in cheap motels, hitching rides, bragging to the wrong people. He keeps showing off about the money he doesn't have. That's what will ruin him." "Why tell me?" I asked quietly. "Why make me watch his fall?" Jeremy leaned forward. "Because you need to know this isn't on you, Maggie. Your son chose this. And the world is reacting the way it always reacts to greed and arrogance. 2 nights later, my phone rang at 3 a.m. The voice on the other end wasn't Carter's. It was deeper, gravelly, heavy with a southern drawl. "You know your boy's been running with bikers out here?" the man asked. "He owes us. Claims he's got $2 million in some account. We know that's smoke." He thought we were fools. We're not. We're teaching him a lesson. Thought you should know. The line went dead. I dropped the phone, my heart thundering. Teaching him a lesson. The words were worse than any threat. The next morning, Jeremy came again, holding a manila envelope. He laid it on the table like it was fragile, dangerous. "Photos," he said simply. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Inside, Carter, beaten but alive, sitting on the curb outside a bar, hands tied with duct tape. His face swollen, one eye shut. Beside him, a biker holding a chain. In the background, a spray-painted wall read, "Pay your debts." I pressed the photos to my chest, torn between rage and despair. "They'll kill him." "They might," Jeremy admitted. "Or they'll let him crawl. Either way, he's marked. He can't show his face without someone wanting a piece of him." He paused, then added, "This is what happens when you steal from everyone, even your own mother." That night, I sat in Scott's chair with the urn in my lap. "What do I do?" I whispered. The house gave no answer. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a dog. 3 days later, karma delivered itself. News broke on the local channels: a man found unconscious near a truck stop in New Mexico, beaten, stripped, robbed of everything but his name. Carter. Alive, but barely. They said he staggered into the police station at dawn, begging for protection. When the officers asked who he was, he gave my last name. Callahan. That name, the one Scott had carried with pride, now spat out as a plea from the lips of a son who had betrayed it. The police contacted me. "He's in custody now, ma'am. Facing charges here and warrants in your state. We'll extradite him soon. You'll have to decide if you want to testify." I hung up and went to the shelf where Scott's urn stood, scarred but safe. "They took you from me once," I whispered. "But I won't let them take me. Not again." For the first time in months, I felt stronger than my grief. Because I knew, Carter's punishment had arrived. And it wasn't mine to carry. The day they brought Carter back to our state was gray, heavy with low clouds, as though the sky itself wanted to keep its eyes down. I stood on the courthouse steps, urn safe at home, heart pounding as if it remembered every betrayal at once. When the transport van pulled up, I expected my son to emerge defiant, jaw set in that familiar sneer. Instead, what stepped out was a man hollowed by consequence. His face bore the map of his running, bruises, scars, a gaze darting for exits that weren't there. Shackles rattled at his ankles. For a heartbeat, I almost didn't recognize him. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Lila's hearing had been postponed, her lawyer buying time with motions, but Carter's case was different. He was charged with interstate flight, extortion, theft, and resisting arrest. The judge sat stern, tired, ready to see another lost son's file. When they called my name, my throat closed. I walked to the stand, palms damp, knees trembling. Carter lifted his head then, eyes meeting mine. For the first time in years, he didn't look angry. He looked desperate. Like the boy who used to climb into Scott's lap after nightmares. "Mrs. Callahan," the prosecutor asked gently, "can you describe the events that led to the theft of your late husband's remains?" The room blurred as I spoke. I told them about the urn, about the ransom, about the threats in the night. My voice wavered when I said, he was my son. But he treated his father's ashes like a bargaining chip, like a poker stake. He forgot Scott was a man, not a vault. And he forgot I was his mother, not his bank. I glanced at Carter. His lips moved, soundless. "I'm sorry." The word stabbed sharper than hate. Sorry after months of terror, after pawning my love for beer money, after nearly shattering the last promise I could keep to my husband. Sorry, too late. When it was Carter's turn, his lawyer painted him as a lost soul, a man tricked by addiction, manipulated by worse company. He begged for leniency. Carter himself spoke, voice cracked. I thought the money was real. I thought I could start over. I was wrong. Mom, he faltered, swallowed hard. I never wanted to hurt Dad. Or you. My chest ached with the truth and the lie braided together. Because maybe he hadn't wanted to. But he had. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Callahan, actions weigh heavier than words. And your actions show cruelty, not confusion. His gavel struck. Remanded without bail. Trial to follow. They led Carter away. He turned once more, eyes wet, lips trembling on the edge of a plea he never spoke aloud. Then the door closed behind him, and the sound was final, like earth on a coffin. Outside, Jeremy was waiting. You did well, he said softly. I feel like I buried him twice, I whispered. Jeremy nodded. Sometimes justice feels like mourning. That night, I didn't sit in Scott's chair. I sat by the urn instead, on the floor, knees aching, hand resting on the cool ceramic. We survived them, I whispered. Somehow, we survived. But deep down, I knew my trials weren't over. Lila was still in jail, her venom undiluted. Carter's trial was yet to come, with stories he might spin, wounds he might weaponize. And me? I was still the mother caught between love and betrayal, the keeper of ashes and promises. And though I was weary, I felt it, a fire in my chest, low but steady. The kind of fire that doesn't burn houses down but keeps a widow alive in the dark. The courthouse smelled of polish and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to places where too many truths have been forced into words. This time, it wasn't Carter's name on the docket, it was Lila's. My daughter. My only girl. When they brought her in, she wore the orange jumpsuit like armor. Her chin was lifted, her eyes glittered with defiance. If Carter had looked broken, Lila looked sharpened. As though jail hadn't humbled her, it had hardened her into something even more dangerous. State versus Lila Callahan, the clerk read, her voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. The prosecutor outlined the charges: extortion, theft, assault. But then he added something I hadn't expected: witness tampering. Apparently, even from jail, Lila had managed to pass messages to friends on the outside. Threats aimed at me. Make her pay. Make her regret testifying. I froze, my stomach sinking. She wasn't finished with me. Not even behind bars. When my turn came, I took the stand again. My voice was steadier this time, forged in the fire of Carter's trial. I told them about the night she shoved me, the broken glasses, the blood. I told them about the messages, the demands for millions, the urn that had vanished from my shelf. My throat caught when I said, she told me she would take what was dearest to me. And she did. Lila's lawyer tried to paint her as a troubled woman, a victim of circumstance, of addiction, of my supposed cold parenting. But then it happened. Lila stood up, unprompted, cutting her lawyer off. You think she's innocent? She spat, pointing at me. She ruined my life. She wanted me to kill my baby when I was 16. She never believed in me, never wanted me. She loved him, she jabbed a finger toward the urn I'd described, more than she ever loved us. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My blood ran cold. That lie again. That wound she carved deeper every time she said it. The judge slammed his gavel. Ms. Callahan, sit down. But Lila wasn't finished. Her voice rose, shrill and shaking. She acts like a victim, but she's a monster. You think I'm the criminal? She's the one who destroyed her own family. They dragged her back into her seat, still screaming, her words dissolving into sobs that felt more like rage than sorrow. The courtroom hushed, every eye on me. I kept my spine straight, my hands folded, even though inside I felt like shattered glass. The prosecutor spoke quietly, almost gently, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen it yourself. This is not remorse. This is not misunderstanding. This is a pattern of manipulation, of cruelty, of a daughter who believed she could hold her own mother hostage. When the session ended, Jeremy was waiting outside. "She tried to gut you," he said softly. "She almost did," I admitted. My hands trembled so badly I pressed them against my coat to still them. But then, as the courthouse doors closed behind me, I realized something important: I had survived it. Again. Her words had cut, yes, but they hadn't killed me. I was still standing. That night, I went home, set fresh flowers by the urn, and whispered, "Scott, I think she hates me because I refused to let her destroy me." Maybe that's all motherhood is, surviving your children's storms. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the windows. It sounded almost like applause. The sentencing hearing for Lila arrived on a day that felt carved from stone, cold, heavy, unyielding. I dressed in dark gray, not black. Black felt too much like mourning, and I refused to mourn her while she still breathed. The courtroom was hushed when the judge read her record. Every charge stood like a pillar: extortion, assault, theft, witness tampering. Each word fell heavier than the last. Lila sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed into slits of fury. She didn't look at me, not once. The prosecutor asked for 10 years. Her lawyer begged for 3, citing addiction, youthful mistakes, though she was 32, and trauma. Then the judge spoke, voice stern but not unkind. "Ms. Callahan, the court recognizes that addiction may cloud judgment. But addiction did not force you to strike your mother, to threaten her with violence, or to desecrate the memory of your father. Those were choices. Choices have consequences." He paused. "You are sentenced to 8 years in state prison. You will be eligible for parole in 5. Lila's head snapped toward me then, eyes blazing with a hatred so fierce it nearly knocked the air from my lungs. Her mouth formed silent words: "This isn't over." The gavel struck. I left the courtroom trembling, both lighter and heavier at once. Outside, Jeremy was waiting, a thermos of coffee in his hand. 8 years, he said. "It's not forever, but it's enough to keep you safe for a while." "Safe from her," I murmured. "But Carter." Jeremy's face shifted. He pulled out his phone, hesitated, then showed me a headline. "Body found along desert highway, identified as fugitive Carter Callahan." The article was short, brutal. He had been found 30 miles outside Tucson, abandoned near a burned-out car. Cause of death: blunt force trauma. No suspects named. Authorities suspected gang retaliation. My knees weakened. Jeremy caught me by the elbow. "Maggie, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to see it like this." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My son, dead in a desert ditch. My daughter, shackled in prison blues. My family, reduced to ashes and court records. That night, I sat on the floor by the urn, the house silent but for the tick of the old clock Scott used to wind. "They're both gone," I whispered. "One by iron bars, one by blood on the sand. And my voice cracked. I'm the one left to remember." I pressed my hand against the urn's scarred surface. For the first time since it had been stolen, I felt no panic, no rage. Only a strange, bone-deep quiet. As though Scott were telling me it was done. That the storm had spent itself. And for the first time since his death, I believed him. The weeks after Carter's death passed in a blur of paperwork, condolences from people who hadn't spoken to me in years, and silence heavy enough to suffocate. I moved through my days like a woman underwater, paying bills, answering calls, showing up to book club with a pie no one touched. But at night, when the house fell still, I sat before the urn and asked Scott the same question: "Is it time?" The ocean had waited 30 years. I had promised him that one day his ashes would mingle with the tide where we walked barefoot, newlyweds with salt on our lips. But grief had made me selfish. I hadn't been ready to let go. And then the children had stolen him, and I'd clung even tighter when he returned. But now, with one child locked away and the other gone forever, the urn felt heavier than ever, like a chain binding me to the worst parts of love. One evening, Jeremy came by, carrying his usual laptop bag and, this time, a bouquet of sunflowers. For brightness, he said awkwardly, setting them in a mason jar on my counter. Then, gently, have you thought about the ocean? I stared at the urn on the shelf. Every night. But I'm afraid if I let him go, I'll have nothing left. You'll have memory, Jeremy said. You'll have peace. And maybe you'll have room for something new. His voice softened. Scott wanted release, Maggie. You've been carrying the weight of everyone else's sins. Maybe it's time to carry only his love. The next morning, I packed a small bag. A scarf, my Bible, a flask of coffee, the urn swaddled in Scott's old flannel shirt. Jeremy drove me the 6 hours to the coast, saying little, just letting the road hum between us. When we arrived, the sky was streaked in pink and gold. The ocean roared, endless and unjudging. I walked barefoot across the sand, the urn pressed to my chest, every step a prayer. At the water's edge, I paused. We made it, love, I whispered. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, the ribboned pouch waited, still whole. I untied it. The ashes caught the wind, lifting in a gray-white cloud, scattering over the waves. For a moment, it looked like he was flying, like every story he ever told about freedom had come true. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't the choking tears of grief. They were softer, cleansing. I let the last handful slip through my fingers, the ocean swallowing what remained. Behind me, Jeremy stood a respectful distance, head bowed, as though honoring a man he'd never met but somehow understood. When it was done, I felt lighter. Not empty, never empty, but lighter. I whispered into the surf, "You're free, Scott." And so am I. That night, Jeremy and I sat on the balcony of a seaside inn. He handed me a cup of coffee, strong and sweet. You did something brave today, he said. I did something final, I corrected softly. Final can be brave, he answered. His eyes met mine, steady and warm. For the first time in months, I didn't look away. And for the first time since widowhood, I felt the faint spark of something I thought had died with Scott, hope. The ocean had taken Scott, and with him it carried away the heaviest part of my grief. When I woke the next morning in the little seaside inn, the air smelled of salt and possibility. I pressed my palm to the empty urn bag I had folded neatly into my suitcase. It was light now, like a vessel that had finally finished its duty. Back home, the house was different. Not louder, not fuller, but no longer suffocating. I still set flowers on the shelf, but where the urn once stood, I placed a framed photo of us from our honeymoon, Scott laughing, his arm around me, his eyes lit with the mischief I'd fallen in love with. Now, when I looked at that space, I saw memory instead of loss. Jeremy became a quiet constant. He still came to book club, still brought me coffee and sunflowers, still made the world feel less heavy. Sometimes we didn't talk about the past at all. Sometimes we just sat in Scott's chair and mine, sharing the silence. And slowly, I began to understand that life after loss didn't have to mean living alone inside grief. But the shadows hadn't disappeared entirely. Lila wrote me letters from prison, angry, blaming, filled with venom. I kept them in a drawer, unopened, the envelopes a reminder that some storms refused to pass. She was my daughter, but I couldn't be her shield anymore. The law would hold her now. Karma had taken Carter, justice had claimed Lila. And I was left alive, which meant I still had a choice. One evening, Jeremy asked, "What now, Maggie?" I looked at the photo of Scott, at the flowers by the shelf, at the home that had once been invaded and violated but now felt safe again. I thought of the waves carrying Scott out to sea, of the whisper I had given him, "You're free, and so am I, what now?" I repeated. Then I smiled, small but real. Now I live. Not for them. Not against them. Just for me. And in that moment, I realized the truth. My children had stolen my husband's ashes, but they hadn't stolen the love he left behind. They couldn't touch it. They couldn't ransom it. That love was mine forever. So I rose, opened the window, and let the night air rush in. It smelled of the ocean, even miles inland. It smelled like freedom. And for the first time in years, I felt ready, not to forget, but to begin.